The courtroom fell into a hush so profound that you could hear the ancient clock on the wall ticking away the seconds. Judge Margaret Thornton had presided over thousands of cases in her 30-year career, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for what was about to unfold on that ordinary Tuesday morning in September. She sat behind her mahogany bench, her reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing the case files before her. It was supposed to be a routine custody hearing, but the moment a small girl with tangled auburn hair walked through those doors, clutching the leash of a scruffy golden retriever, Margaret felt something shift in the air. She didn't know it yet, but in the next 20 minutes, everything she thought she understood about justice, family, and the resilience of the human spirit would be turned upside down. The case before Judge Thornton involved 8-year-old Emma Reeves, a child caught in the crossfire of a bitter custody dispute. Her parents, David and Lisa Reeves, had divorced 2 years earlier, and what started as an amicable separation had deteriorated into a toxic battle. David, a software engineer with a steady income and a new apartment in the suburbs, wanted full custody. Lisa, a part-time nurse who had struggled with depression after the divorce, was fighting to keep her daughter. Social workers had been called, psychologists had submitted reports, and now, on this September morning, Judge Thornton would make a decision that would shape this little girl's future. Emma sat in the witness chair, her legs dangling several inches above the floor. Beside her, permitted by special request from her therapist, was her dog, Copper, a 3-year-old golden retriever with soulful brown eyes and a tail that never stopped wagging. The dog had been Emma's constant companion since her parents' separation, a gift from her grandmother who had passed away shortly after. Dr. Rachel Martinez, Emma's therapist, had insisted that Copper be present during the hearing, explaining that the child experienced severe anxiety when separated from the animal. Judge Thornton studied the little girl carefully. Emma's clothes were clean but worn, her sneakers scuffed at the toes. She kept her eyes down, her small hand resting on Copper's head, fingers gently stroking the soft fur behind his ears. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. David sat with his attorney, a sharp-dressed woman with a leather briefcase full of documents proving his financial stability and his new 3-bedroom home. Lisa sat alone on the other side, unable to afford representation, her hands trembling in her lap. The hearing proceeded with the usual formalities. David's attorney painted a picture of a loving father who could provide everything Emma needed: a stable home, good schools, extracurricular activities, a future full of opportunities. She presented bank statements, lease agreements, and character references from David's colleagues and neighbors. Then she turned her attention to Lisa, methodically dismantling the mother's case. The late rent payments, the missed doctor's appointments, the hospitalization for depression 18 months ago. Each piece of evidence was a dagger, and Lisa seemed to shrink further into her chair with every word. When it was Lisa's turn to speak, she stood slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. She talked about bedtime stories and homemade pancakes on Sunday mornings. She described how she braided Emma's hair before school and how they would sing together while doing dishes. She admitted her struggles, her mistakes, the darkness she had fought through, but she also spoke of her love, a fierce, unconditional love that had kept her going through the hardest days of her life. Judge Thornton had heard similar testimonies countless times, single parents fighting for their children, each claiming to be the better option, each believing their love was enough. She looked down at her notes, at the social worker's report that recommended placement with the father. Everything pointed toward David. He had the resources, the stability, the support system. The decision seemed clear. But then she looked at Emma, and something made her pause. The little girl hadn't looked up once during the entire hearing. She sat perfectly still, her hand never leaving Copper's head, her other hand gripping the dog's leash so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Judge Thornton had seen fear in children before, but this was different. This was a child who had learned to disappear, to make herself small, to survive. "Emma," Judge Thornton said gently, leaning forward, "Sweetheart, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?" The girl nodded almost imperceptibly, but still didn't look up. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Another small nod. Emma, I want you to know that this is a safe place. Nobody here is going to hurt you, and whatever you say, whatever you feel is important. Can you tell me who you'd like to live with?" The question hung in the air. David leaned forward in his seat, confidence written across his face. Lisa pressed a tissue to her eyes, hope and terror warring in her expression. And Emma finally lifted her head. Her eyes, green like spring leaves, were filled with tears that threatened to spill over. She started, her voice so quiet that the court reporter had to ask her to speak up. Emma swallowed hard, then tried again. "I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings." Judge Thornton's heart clenched. This child, this beautiful, broken child, was more worried about her parents' feelings than her own well-being. "You won't hurt anyone's feelings, Emma, I promise. This is about what's best for you. That's all that matters here." Emma looked at her father, then at her mother. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "I love my dad. He has a nice house and he buys me things and he's never sad like mommy gets sad sometimes." David's face lit up with premature victory. But, that single word, but, changed everything. Emma's grip on Copper's leash tightened even more. The dog, sensing her girl's distress, shifted closer, pressing his body against her leg. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the lawyers had stopped rustling papers. "Daddy is good at a lot of things," Emma continued, her voice growing slightly stronger. "But Mommy is good at loving me. And I know she gets sad sometimes because of the divorce and because Grandma died and because we don't have a lot of money, but she never stops trying. She never gives up, even when I can see how tired she is." Judge Thornton found herself blinking back her own tears. In 30 decades on the bench, she had learned to maintain professional distance, but this child was cracking through every defense she had built. "Thank you, Emma," Judge Thornton said softly. "That was very brave of you." But Emma wasn't finished. She looked down at Copper again, and her hand moved in a subtle gesture, a small signal that Judge Thornton almost missed. The dog immediately stood, moved to position himself between Emma and her father's side of the courtroom, and sat down again, his body language protective and alert. It happened so quickly, so naturally, that most people in the room didn't notice, but Judge Thornton noticed. And more importantly, she noticed the way Emma's shoulders relaxed the moment the dog moved, the way her breathing seemed to ease, the way she angled her body away from her father, as if instinctively creating distance. Something cold ran down Judge Thornton's spine. She had seen enough cases, enough patterns, enough subtle signs to recognize when something was wrong. Without saying a word, she made a decision that would later be called unprecedented. "We're going to take a 15-minute recess," she announced, standing abruptly. "Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, please remain in the courtroom with your counsel. Emma, would you and Copper like to come with me to my chambers? We'll have some cookies, and maybe you can tell me more about this very smart dog of yours." David's attorney objected immediately, but Judge Thornton silenced her with a look that had made seasoned lawyers tremble. "This is my courtroom, counselor, and I will speak with this child privately if I deem it necessary. 15 minutes. In the quiet of her chambers, surrounded by law books and family photos, Judge Thornton sat down on the floor, something she hadn't done in years, and invited Emma to sit beside her. Copper immediately placed himself between them, his head on Emma's lap. "That was quite a signal you gave Copper out there," Judge Thornton said conversationally, offering Emma a chocolate chip cookie from the jar she kept for her grandchildren's visits. "Did you train him to do that?" Emma nodded, taking a small bite of cookie. "Dr. Martinez helped me. She said I should teach Copper to help me when I feel scared." "And you felt scared in the courtroom?" Another small nod. Silence stretched between them, but Judge Thornton had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the most important tool in getting to the truth. "Can I tell you a secret?" she finally whispered, her eyes still on Copper. "But you can't tell anyone because Daddy will be mad." Every alarm bell in Judge Thornton's mind was ringing. "Emma, if someone is hurting you, I need to know about it. That's my job, to keep children safe, and I promise you I won't let anyone hurt you for telling the truth." What came next would later require police involvement, additional investigations, and ultimately criminal charges. Emma, in the halting, confused words of a child trying to make sense of something she didn't understand, described visits to her father's apartment. How he was nice when his girlfriend was there, but different when they were alone. How he would get angry if she cried for her mother. How he grabbed her arm so hard that it left bruises, and when she told her mom, he called her a liar and said she must have fallen. How he told her that if she wasn't a good girl, if she didn't say the right things in court, they would take Copper away from her forever. The dog, Emma explained, had learned to sense when she was afraid. Dr. Martinez helped her train Copper to respond to certain signals, to position himself protectively, to give her something solid and safe to hold on to when the world felt dangerous. And that signal in the courtroom, that simple gesture that Judge Thornton almost missed, was Emma's way of saying she needed protection. When they returned to the courtroom 20 minutes later, Judge Thornton's face was grave. She called for